Turning now to the war in Ukraine, and Russian President Vladimir Putin is issuing a cryptic threat of military escalation if Western countries continue to deliver weapons to Ukraine. Joe Khalil joins us now live to break down the Russian president's message. Joe.
Yeah, another threat, Rudabeh, a brand new one from Vladimir Putin, saying that if the United States and NATO allies provide long-range missiles to Ukraine, that Russia's going to respond with a bombing campaign that we have not seen yet in this conflict. Now, this comes right on the heels of the United States delivering mid-range, not long-range, but mid-range missile systems to Ukraine that allow Ukrainian fighters to hit Russian targets about 50 miles away. And by the way, just over the weekend, we learned that the British defense minister has also committed that Britain is going to send similar weapons into Ukraine as well. Now, we get this threat from Vladimir Putin. A lot of Ukrainians may be thinking that this threat rings hollow at this point, just because right now, the area where we're seeing the most fighting in the Donbas region, about 2 weeks ago, President Zelensky said that that entire region is almost basically all destroyed. Russia's in control of about 80% of it. They've taken Mariupol, so it begs the question, how much worse of a bombing campaign can you get? Nonetheless, Vladimir Putin made that threat on Russian state TV, and a translation of what he said we're going to provide you now. He says, if these weapons come into Ukraine, quote, we will draw conclusions from that and employ our weapons that we have in sufficient quantities to strike those facilities that we are not attacking so far. We should mention that as the fighting continues, just over the weekend, Ukrainian fighters have made some serious gains. They had some success repelling the Russian forces from coming in and trying to take over the city of Severodonetsk. That's one of an important strategic cities in this region where the fighting continues, Rudabeh. But we've seen these kinds of threats before from Vladimir Putin. The Ukrainians and the NATO allies that are in this fight obviously have to take them all very seriously.
That's for sure, Joe. Thank you. And for more on Putin's new warning to the U.S., we bring in Brian Whitmore. He is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. He's been a lecturer in both Ukraine and Russia. Good morning. Thanks for being here. What do you make of Putin threatening to strike facilities that, quote, we are not attacking so far if the U.S. supplies these long-range missiles to Ukraine? I mean, what do you think that means? And is this anything new, or is this just more saber-rattling from Putin?
Good morning, Rudabeh. I mean, this is part of a pattern where Putin is trying to leverage Western fears of escalation, of this war escalating beyond a war between Russia and Ukraine and a broader conflict between Russia and the West. But it's comes as Russia is moving Iskander missiles these are ballistic missiles, intermediate range ballistic missiles to Belarus. These are nuclear capable. They're not nuclear armed at the moment, but these have been recently deployed to Belarus and can hit areas in central and western Ukraine. I don't think it's an accident that this attack on Kyiv came shortly after these Iskanders were moved to Belarus. So this is Putin playing on fears in the West of escalation. I think he's talking about hitting Kyiv and hitting possibly targets in western Ukraine should the West give these artillery, these missile systems to Ukraine. I would like to add also, Rudabeh, that Ukraine really needs these systems to counter the Russian artillery advantage in eastern Ukraine at the moment.
Right. They've been pleading with the West for more help. And this isn't the first time Putin has used nuclear blackmail.
No, it's not. He's been having nuclear blackmail throughout the entire. Now, what he's doing right now is not nuclear blackmail, but it's almost implied. His warning on Russian state television to hit targets in Ukraine that they hadn't hit before, at a time when he was moving nuclear-capable Iskander missiles into Belarus that could hit different areas of Ukraine, including central and western Ukraine.
Do you believe Putin is playing the long game here when it comes to the West's support for Ukraine? I mean, his invasion so far does seem to have backfired in that it is uniting the West. Will that last?
Well, this is what Putin's counting on. He's counting on that as the war drags on, that the West is good. There's going to be fatigue in the West, and that the support for Ukraine will diminish. Western unity will come apart as the cost of the sanctions begins to hit Western economies. Not to the degree it's hitting the Russian economy, but nevertheless, he's counting on that that there's going to be fatigue in the West. I was just at a conference in Slovakia where I was meeting with a bunch of Ukrainian officials, and Ukrainians are worried about this. They're worried about that the West is going to tire of this. And their attitude is that we can fight this war. We just need the support and we need the weapons that we've been getting thus far. So this is a very real fear that this is going to happen. But yes, to answer your question, Rudabeh, I do believe that is Putin's game.
Right, and neither side backing down thus far, and the Ukrainians really surprising the world with their resistance. Ukraine is slamming French President Emmanuel Macron after he warned days ago, quote, "We must not humiliate Russia so that the day when the fighting stops, we can build an exit ramp through diplomatic means." He said, "I'm convinced that it's France's role to be a mediating power." What do you make of those remarks?
I mean, I found those remarks very disturbing, quite frankly. I mean, and this is not the time to be putting pressure on Ukraine to reach some kind of a deal with Russia. There's been a lot of talk of so-called land for peace deals. And what that leaves out is when you give land to Russia, you're also giving people to Russia. And what we've seen in Bucha and Mariupol, we see what happens to people who find themselves on land that is occupied by Russia. Every conflict ends in a negotiated diplomatic settlement. That's axiomatic. But the point is, we want Ukraine to be in the strongest possible position when we get to that point. We are not at that point yet, and I think President Macron's overtures here are a bit premature.
All right, Brian Whitmore, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.